In the small coastal town of Harbor's End, where the Atlantic wind never stopped complaining and the docks smelled of salt and old rope, lived a widow named Clara Brennan. Her husband, Thomas, had been a fisherman. 3 winters earlier, a sudden nor'easter had taken his boat and him with it. Clara was left with 2 children, 16-year-old Michael, who had grown hard and silent, and 9-year-old Sophie, who had not spoken a single word since the day they brought her father's empty oilskin coat home. Clara worked for a man named Mr. Harlan, who owned half the fishing boats in the harbor. She mended nets in a cold shed behind the fish market from dawn until her fingers bled. Harlan paid her just enough to keep the electricity on and put thin soup on the table. Every Friday, he found a reason to shave a few dollars off her wages, giving excuses of slow work, damaged net, market's soft this week. Clara never argued. She simply took the money and walked home along the wet pier with her shoulders bent against the wind. Michael hated it. He hated the empty chair at the table, hated the way Sophie stared at the sea for hours without blinking, and most of all, he hated watching his mother come home with red hands and quiet eyes. One evening, Michael slammed the door so hard the windows rattled.
"I'm done watching you crawl for that man. I'll find work on a boat. I'll make real money."
Clara's voice was steady, but her hands trembled as she set down the mending needle.
You will finish school. That is non-negotiable.
School doesn't fill Sophie's plate. And it sure as hell doesn't make her talk again.
Sophie, sitting in the corner with her knees drawn up, simply turned her face to the wall. That night, Clara sat alone at the kitchen table after the children were in bed. She opened the old biscuit tin where she kept the last of Thomas's things. A folded letter he had never mailed, a cracked compass, and a small silver locket that held a lock of Sophie's baby hair. She pressed the locket to her forehead and whispered the same prayer she had whispered every night for 3 years.
Just keep them safe. I can carry the rest.
Two weeks later, the town was hit by another storm. Not as violent as the one that took Thomas, but strong enough to tear boats from their moorings and hurl debris up onto the beach. The morning after, Clara walked the shoreline looking for usable rope or wood she might sell. Near the old jetty, she saw something half buried in wet sand. A small wooden chest bound with rusted iron straps. One of the straps had broken. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, lay a heavy canvas bag. She opened it. Gold coins, dozens of them. Old, heavy, and real. Clara's heart slammed against her ribs so hard she thought she might faint. She looked up and down the empty beach. No one. Only the cry of gulls and the hiss of retreating waves. She sank to her knees in the wet sand, the bag clutched against her chest. For a long, breathless minute, she did not move. Her mind raced with numbers she had calculated 100 times in the dark. $1,800 for a full year of speech therapy for Sophie, the specialist in Portland who might finally unlock her voice. 400 more would buy Michael a proper winter coat and boots that didn't let in the rain. With the rest, she could walk into Harlan's shed on Monday morning, set the mending needle on his desk, and never come back. She could sleep through the night without counting every coin in the biscuit tin. She could look her children in the eyes without the constant, grinding shame of not being enough. The gold felt warm through the canvas, almost alive. Clara's hands shook. She closed her eyes and saw Sophie's silent face, Michael's clenched fists, the empty chair at the table. For 3 years she had carried everything alone. Here, at last, was a way to set the weight down. A wave washed over her boots, cold as the night Thomas never came home. Clara opened her eyes. The vision of ease was still there, sharp and almost unbearable. She stayed on her knees until the water soaked through her coat and the temptation sat fully inside her. Felt, weighed, and still refused. Only then did she close the bag. place it back inside the chest, and lift the whole thing into her arms. She found Walter Pike in his tiny shack at the far end of the harbor. Walter was an old fisherman whose own boat had gone down years earlier. When Clara set the chest on his table and opened it, the old man stared as if he were seeing a ghost.
"This was my father's,"
He whispered.
"He was a merchant skipper. 40 years ago, his ship, the Northern Star, went down in a winter gale not far from this very beach. The chest was in the captain's cabin. I was only a boy when they told me the sea had taken both him and everything he owned. I never stopped looking."
Clara only nodded.
"Take half. Take more than half. You have children."
She shook her head.
It isn't mine.
That evening, Michael found her sitting on the porch steps, staring at the water. He dropped beside her, angry again.
People are talking. They say you found something valuable and gave it away. Are you crazy? Sophie still isn't talking. We're still eating soup. What the hell is wrong with you?
Clara turned to him.
When your father was alive, we had almost nothing. But we never went to bed ashamed of how we got what we had. I will not start now. And I will not teach you that the only way to survive is to take what doesn't belong to you, even when it would be easy, even when it would fix everything.
Michael's face twisted. For a second, she thought he would shout again. Instead, he buried his face in his hands and began to cry the way he had the night they told him his father was gone. Sophie appeared in the doorway, barefoot, watching them. She walked over, sat on Clara's other side, and leaned her head against her mother's arm. For a long time, the three of them sat in silence while the tide came in. 3 days later, Walter Pike appeared at their door with a young lawyer from the next town. The gold had been part of an old family inheritance that had been declared lost at sea. Because Clara had returned it, the estate was able to settle. Walter had no children. He signed over a modest fishing boat, nothing fancy but sound, and enough money to keep it running for 2 years on the condition that Clara and Michael work it together. Michael stared at the papers as if they might disappear. Clara looked at her son.
We do this honestly. We pay the crew fare. We never short anyone. And every Sunday we leave a share for whoever needs it most in this town. That is the only way I will step onto that boat.
Michael swallowed hard. Then he nodded. The first season was brutal. The boat needed constant work. Michael learned the hard way that the sea does not care about anger. Sophie came with them some days, sitting in the small cabin with a notebook, drawing the horizon over and over. One late afternoon, as the sun turned the water the color of old copper, Sophie pointed at a seal that had surfaced near the bow and said, in a voice rough from disuse,
"He's looking at us."
Clara dropped the rope she was coiling. Michael froze. Sophie looked between them, almost surprised at the sound that had come out of her own mouth. Then she said it again, softer.
"He's looking at us."
Clara sank to her knees on the wet deck and pulled both her children into her arms. She did not speak. She only held them while the boat rocked and the seal watched, and the long, cold years of silence finally began to loosen their grip. Years later, when the people of Harbor's End told the story, they did not talk much about the gold. They talked about the widow who walked the beach after a storm and chose the harder path when no one was watching. They talked about the boy who learned that rage is a poor compass. They talked about the little girl who found her voice again because someone refused to let desperation turn into theft. And the moral that settled into the bones of that town was simple and unyielding. When life has already taken almost everything from you, the one thing it cannot take is the kind of person you decide to remain. Integrity kept in the darkest hour becomes the light that leads others home. And sometimes, if you are very fortunate, it even leads your own children back to you.